Hi, I'm Rob Lytle, CEO of West Michigan Dirtworks. I want to welcome you to our team of talented individuals and thank you for choosing West Michigan Dirtworks as your place of employment. During this video, we're going to talk about risks and hazards that you may encounter on a job site, such as the one we're on here today. Ultimately, it's our mission to provide a safe work environment, not only for our team members, but other contractors that may be working on site and the general public. Once again, I want to thank you for choosing West Michigan Dirtworks and assure you that we are committed to your health, safety, and well-being.
Hello, my name is Tammy Clark. I'm the Safety Director at West Michigan Dirtworks, and I wanted to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. The purpose of this training video is to introduce you to the world of construction, excavation, and hazard recognition, awareness, and avoidance. So we will be going through a few different topics of different hazardous situations that you might be exposed to and explaining to you what it is you need to be aware of, things you need to pay attention to, and things that you can do to make sure that not only are you safe on the job, but your fellow employees as well. One of the biggest dangers on a construction project is the fact that there is heavy equipment and lots of different trades, lots of different types of equipment, and it's all moving and acting and interacting simultaneously. The number one thing that you need to remember to keep yourself safe on a construction project is to pay attention to your surroundings. The construction industry is the most hazardous industry in America. Within the construction industry, the excavation trade is one of the most hazardous trades. So it's very, very important for your safety and your well-being and for that of those around you that you continuously remind yourself to pay attention. Pay attention to the activity of not only your coworkers and the equipment that's moving around while you're doing your work, but those of other trades as well. Pay attention to the sounds you're hearing. Audible backup alarms are there for a reason. They're to remind you that they're moving and they're acting in close proximity to where you're working. The problem is, after a while, it becomes like white noise and fades into the background. So remember at all times when you hear backup alarms that it may be speaking to you. So what we're witnessing here are two employees who are engaged in a conversation about an activity on their project. The problem is they've been around the equipment that's been moving, making noise, the noise from the engine, the audible backup alarms rolling all day. And they are no longer hearing and paying attention to the noise that's become now white noise in their background. This is a very common problem in the construction industry when working around heavy equipment, and it is one of the #1 causes of accidents and fatalities. This is called a rollover accident or a runover accident. These backup accidents happen more frequently than people realize, and it is simply due to the lack of paying attention. One of the other problems is that these employees are in the blind spot around this equipment, and they do not realize that the operator cannot see them. So they are not paying attention, they are not hearing the audible backup alarm, they are not realizing that this particular audible backup alarm is talking to them and it is heading their way. But because they're hearing this noise all day, they've just tuned it out and are not paying attention. So always remember to pay attention to the sights, the sounds, the noises, the activities, and the movement happening around you, not just by your own employees, but other trades as well. This is the #1 way that you can avoid fatalities of runover accidents. Phones are a no-no on a construction project. The only time you should ever be on your phone is if you are a spotter working with an excavator operator who cannot see their work activity and is relying on the spotter to help them move around overhead lines, or if you are operating a crane and cannot see where you are placing something, having to rely on the spotter. When working on a construction project, especially around heavy equipment, it's very important to remember and always assume that you are in the blind spot of whatever equipment is operating around you. Most of the time, heavy equipment has very large blind spots, and you must assume that the operator cannot see you. In fact, it's very, very important for you to start with the assumption they can't see you in order to avoid severe accidents, injuries, and fatalities. Runover accidents are some of the most common causes of fatalities on construction projects, particularly with excavation projects. Make sure to remind yourself when squeezing between pieces of equipment or in close proximity to other objects that you stop and get the attention of the operator. Make sure they give you a thumbs up and stop working so you can pass through safely. There are specific requirements for working around excavations. The main things you need to remember are: number one, never ever jump down into a trench or an open excavation greater than 5 feet in depth unless you are assured that the sides are sloped or benched, or that the excavation itself is protected with shoring or shielding measures. It is illegal and it is very dangerous. Whenever accessing an excavation greater in depth than 4 feet, you must make sure that you are utilizing a safe ladder or an earthen ramp that is properly sloped to allow safe access and egress. Ladders must be placed no further apart than 25 feet from each employee. This is very important because if there is a cave-in or an accident or an emergency, whether it be an underground utility or hazardous atmosphere, the employees must be able to access or egress that excavation quickly and safely. All excavations greater than 5 feet in depth must be sloped or properly benched to allow for safe operations within the excavation, whether it is a shallow excavation or a straight up and down trench. The biggest problem is a potential cave-in. So you need to make sure before you put yourself at risk that you see proper shielding, proper shoring, proper sloping, or proper benching. If you're not sure, please ask the operator or your foreman. But whatever you do, do not ever jump down into an excavation of any kind without ensuring that the sides are properly secure and protected to prevent you from being trapped in a cave-in. One of the greatest hazards of any excavation is utility lines. Overhead lines present a grave danger to operating equipment that can potentially strike an energized line or even become energized by getting within the magnetic zone of the line. For this reason, it is an OSHA requirement that you maintain a minimum of a 10-foot clearance from any overhead electric line. If you are working as a spotter, helping to maintain clearance for an operator, it is imperative that you are not on your phone or distracted by any other task. If it is not possible to do the work without maintaining a 10-foot clearance, you must work with the utility company who owns the line and follow the clearance tables within the OSHA electrical standard. For underground utilities, there can be no digging before contacting the state governing body that oversees and maintains the underground utilities. In Michigan, that authority is MISDIG. Once they have marked the lines, you must locate them by hand digging. If it is necessary to work around the located, energized lines, you must support and mark the lines. The operator may then dig safely and carefully around the lines. In the excavation industry, it's very important that you always remember to wear your hard hat. You are working around equipment with shovels, sides, arms, moving superstructures, cabs, and equipment that can come into contact and strike you in the head at any moment. There have been many serious accidents and fatalities caused by an employee not wearing a hard hat and getting struck. As you can see, hard hats protect not only from overhead falls, but from the side and from behind as well. To avoid fatalities working around heavy equipment, you must always be wearing your hard hat on a construction project, especially when working around shovels and digging equipment. High visibility vests, as you can see, are one of the things that have been proven to prevent fatalities by an accidental strike. It has been proven through scientific studies that this bright safety green will cause an operator to turn their head at distances of 15 feet or more, whereas any other color, you will blend right into the horizon. Boots are another form of PPE that are a protective measure in the event of a strike or a rollover or a crushing accident. It is a legal requirement on a construction project by OSHA that you wear safety shoes or steel-toed boots. Safety glasses are required to be worn anytime there is a danger of a splash, flying object, or an eye injury. Anytime you are cutting, welding, or using hand tools, it is very important that you remember to wear safety glasses. In the summer months, dehydration due to excessive heat can cause serious illness and injury. It is very important to remember to take frequent breaks in the shade and stay hydrated. Recognizing the signs and symptoms of heat illness and exhaustion before it becomes life-threatening is critical. If you become lightheaded, feel nauseated, dizzy, or faint, or feel any of these symptoms, be sure to report them to your foreman immediately. Well, hello everyone, and now that you have seen the on-site actual worksite conditions and we've talked through some of the most critical health and safety challenges that you will be exposed to when working on an excavation project, we're going to take some time to work through the West Michigan Dirtworks Health and Safety Manual. This is a requirement by law that we provide training to you both on site, in the field, and per our company policies based on OSHA and Michigan OSHA law and regulations. So I know you all have your health and safety manuals with me. If you would just follow along, we're going to work through the manual. There's 21 pages, and we're going to make this as painless as possible. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the most important topics that you need to know regarding the company's health and safety program, some of the expectations, the disciplinary enforcement measures that you need to be aware of if you choose to work unsafely and if you choose to break the rules. We will have to hold you accountable through our disciplinary policy, but that's not the fun stuff. So let's get into this health and safety manual. If you would, please turn to page 1 with me. We're going to skip the table of contents, or excuse me, page 3, statement of policy. So it's the policy of West Michigan Dirtworks to provide a safe and healthy workplace free of recognized hazards for all employees. It is also the policy of West Michigan Dirtworks to comply with federal, state, and local regulations governing construction safety and health in the execution of our program. West Michigan Dirtworks has chosen to partner with myself, Tammy Clark, and you will see me on your projects doing health and safety compliance audits and inspections. This is a time to ask questions. This is a time to work through challenging situations, maybe trade-specific situations. For example, how do I get in and out of that trench box? How high must my ladder be? Or when you're struggling with a particular issue, when you see me on site, I'm there to help with these challenging situations, and I'm also there to help enforce the rules and make sure that West Michigan Dirtworks employees are complying with all the regulations and all the health and safety requirements of not only Michigan OSHA, but also the company health and safety program. So when you see me on site, don't run away. Come and ask questions. I'm here to help. Okay, if you would please turn with me to page 4. We're going to talk about safety responsibilities. For management, West Michigan Dirtworks management has retained my services to ensure operational responsibilities. Managers have a much higher level of responsibility in both getting the job done safely and on time, and ensuring that the employees are abiding by the company policy rules and my OSHA regulations as well. So upper management, the owners of the company and upper management have retained my services or the services of another consultation firm at times, just to make sure that we're doing everything the right way, to make sure that you all go home healthy, safe, in the same condition that you showed up to work in the first place. But management on site, the foreman or the crew leaders, are also held to a little bit higher standard. It is important that you recognize, yes, we must get this job done on time. Sometimes we're working under liquidated damages conditions, which puts a real time crunch on our projects. However, it is the manager's responsibility on that project to ensure that the job also gets done safely, watching that all of the employees are doing their jobs and doing them safely. And if they are not, if they're breaking the rules or violating any of the compliance requirements, that they stop, they educate that employee, and they ensure compliance. If you would, turn with me to page 5. Employees. Employees are also responsible for performing their work in a safe manner. So while we have specific requirements for management and foremen and crew leaders, we also have requirements for employees. Employees, West Michigan Dirtworks takes their employee responsibility very seriously. We require that if you are going to work for West Michigan Dirtworks, you are going to work safely and you're going to work compliantly. This is a very hazardous industry, as demonstrated by some of the graphics that you saw in the beginning of this video. So because it's such a high hazard industry, we have a zero tolerance policy for certain safety and health requirements, and it is your responsibility to follow the rules, to abide by company policies, to abide by my OSHA requirements. And if you choose not to, there will be disciplinary action. It's the only way we can ensure that you will be safe and you will return home to your families every day. So employees, please make sure that you use company and my OSHA required PPE at all times. Store and maintain your PPE in good working condition and return any damaged PPE to the company, to your supervisor for replacement as needed. Inspect your work area for unsafe conditions and always correct any unsafe conditions. So remember, you heard in the beginning of this video when we were on site, you heard the company president, Rob Lytle, tell all of you that the company has given you stop work authority. Every employee in this company has stop work authority. So as you are working and you are constantly monitoring your work area for unsafe conditions, if you notice something is unsafe, you must respond to immediately stop work, report this to your foreman. If need be, you may be the only one who recognizes an unsafe condition. Uncovered utilities in a trench, something like that. You may be the only employee who notices that, and that's why we've given every employee in the company stop work authority. So make sure that you're keeping your working area safe and reporting unsafe conditions immediately to your foreman. Even if you suspect, if you're not certain about something, we would much rather have you be safe than sorry. Even if you suspect something is dangerous, please stop, notify your foreman, and get them involved to ensure that you can keep working and others around you can keep working in a safe manner. Use tools and equipment safely and in the manner for which they are designed. Never ever rig something together that was not designed by the manufacturer to be used in that condition. In the same manner, always use the tools in the manner that they were designed by the manufacturer as far as not removing guards and safety features. Never remove guards from saws, never remove guards from abrasive grinders, things like that, just to get a better angle. That's absolutely illegal in the work environment. If you are struggling to make a cut, if you're using a saw or a grinder and you can't get the correct angle, please inform your supervisor and we'll come up with an alternative method for getting that job done. There are times when it is not feasible to do the job and use the tool or the equipment in the manner in which it was designed, and those are situations that the foreman will contact me and we will write up an alternative plan using OSHA's feasibility language. But never just rip a guard off or shimmy a guard up in place out of service, so to speak, just to make it more convenient. That's never acceptable, it's illegal, and it's actually dangerous. Okay, follow all job site safety rules, and this includes sometimes working for a general contractor that has additional safety rules other than above and beyond West Michigan Dirtworks or my OSHA's. If it is in your contract, you are contractually obligated to follow those safety rules. So never argue with a superintendent who tells you, you must do this or that. Never say, no, that's not what OSHA says, because you may be working under a contract that has more stringent requirements in place. If you're not sure, ask your foreman. Okay, let's skip down to the next bullet point. Be aware of your physical limitations and responsible for working within them. Now, I want to bring up something that's important for you as a new employee to notify the foreman or company management of. If you have any physical limitations that would prevent you from doing a particular project, we need to know to keep you safe and prevent you from being injured on the job. This also includes allergies to bees, things like that. If you have a severe allergy to something in the environment that could cause a serious illness or injury to you, please inform company management. You need to have your EpiPen on you, and it's important that your foreman understands if you are stung by a bee and you start showing signs of anaphylactic shock, something like that, it's important for them to understand so that they can help you administer that medication. Okay, if you would, turn with me to page 6. Okay, accident, incident, and near-miss management. First aid kits are provided and available in all West Michigan Dirtworks trucks, job trailers, and gang boxes. All work-related accidents, injuries, illnesses, and near misses must be reported and documented using the company's Accident Incident Near Miss form. The company will not authorize medical treatment and/or evaluation for any injury or illness unless it has been documented as a work-related and reported to the company. Unless it is an emergency situation. In an emergency situation, always go immediately to the nearest emergency room or urgent care facility. Unreported injuries and illnesses that later result in a compensation claim will be questioned and investigated by the workers' compensation carrier. So it is very important that anytime there is an injury or an illness on site, it is documented on the injury and illness form. It's called the OSHA 301 recordable form. It's very important because if an injury ever turns into a long-term injury where workman's comp becomes part of the process, workman's comp, the insurance company, will deny the claim if there's never been documentation. So one of the things that you will learn very quickly is documentation is a very important part of our work today, whether it is an injury, an illness, or even a near miss. So let's talk about accidents, injuries, incidents, and near misses. All accidents are to be reported. However, special reporting procedures are required with serious accidents involving serious injuries, internal injuries, multiple fractures, amputations, hospitalization, multiple injuries, and fatalities. Let's hope you're never involved in any of these. If you work safely and according to the rules and the policies, you should never be involved in a serious accident. In the event that something does happen that is maybe outside of your control, you hit an unmarked line, something like that, there are proper recording and documentation procedures that must be followed. West Michigan Dirtworks must be notified as soon as possible whenever a serious accident occurs. Michigan OSHA requires that they be notified within 8 hours of a fatality and within 24 hours whenever an employee is admitted to the hospital, whenever an employee experiences an amputation. This even includes a little fingertip, part of the finger, including the fingertip or the loss of an eye. So if there's a fatality, it must be reported to Michigan OSHA within 8 hours. If this is not done properly, the company will face severe fines and investigation by Michigan OSHA. If there is a serious injury requiring or involving any of the other things that I just discussed, make sure that you report to the company so the company can report to MyOSHA within 24 hours. If you're not sure about the forms and the documentation, just contact your foreman and the foreman will contact me or company management to make sure that you get the proper documentation for recording and documentation purposes. I want to talk real briefly about a near miss. What is a near miss accident? We all know what serious accidents are, serious injuries are. But near misses are very important to document and to investigate because while it may have been just a near miss, a close call, the next time we may not be so lucky. So near misses, say you strike an underground utility, nobody got hurt, there was no explosion or electrocution, but there was contact made with something energized. That is a near miss situation. There was actual contact that could have resulted in a very serious injury, accident, or fatality. That must be documented on the company's near miss form, and it needs to be investigated for root cause analysis. How did this happen? Whose fault was it? Was their fault? How can we avoid this in the future so that we can avoid fatalities or serious injuries down the road? Okay, page 7. The accident, incident, and near miss report form should be found in the back of your company safety manual in the forms section. If you don't have access to it online, please refer to the company manual, which you should have in your truck. The foreman should have a copy in his truck at all times. And at that point, it needs to be filled out as soon as possible once it is ensured or assured that there are no injuries, that there is no property damage or vehicular damage, and that the site and the scene is secured. Then we immediately need to report, fill out the form, and report it to company management. Okay, page 8, general safety and health policies. So job site inspections. Michigan OSHA requires that the company do frequent and regular job site inspections to ensure that the company employees are working safely and according to the company rules and Michigan OSHA rules. This is why you'll see me on site occasionally, or somebody who works for me or a coworker, and this is a time to ensure that everything is being done properly. So again, when you see me, ask questions. If you're not sure about things, there are always things in our working environment that come up, especially with trade-specific companies like West Michigan Dirtworks. There are always very trade-specific items or questions, and instead of just doing it and just hoping you're doing it right, when you see me on site, come and talk to me and share with me some of these challenges, ask me questions, and we'll figure out a safe and compliant solution. OSHA inspections. Okay, under normal circumstances, and I'm going to explain this in just a minute, West Michigan Dirtworks will cooperate with MyOSHA compliance officers. These officers will request permission to inspect a West Michigan Dirtworks work site. The credentials of all compliance officers should be verified as soon as possible after their arrival, or during the opening conference at the latest. West Michigan Dirtworks management should be notified about the inspection as soon as possible after becoming aware of the inspection. So the way the OSHA inspection process works is that OSHA allows a compliance officer to inspect a project under certain conditions. So if an OSHA compliance officer introduces himself or herself to you, you need to first of all ask them politely if they would show you their credentials. Once they show you their credentials, you need to ask them again politely if they would please wait while you contact company management. that inspector is required to give you up to 1 hour to contact your safety or health manager, allow them to get on site, or at least handle the inspection for you over the phone. You should also then allow your company health and safety officer to get on site and handle the opening conference for you, asking certain questions. It is not acceptable, because you are mobile crews. You are going to occasionally see OSHA inspectors just drive by and stop in because they're curious. This is not acceptable. So once the company management is notified of an OSHA inspector on site, they will ask that inspector what is the nature of their visit. They had better respond with, "I'm here to investigate either a fatality or a catastrophe," which you would know about, or "I'm here because I got a complaint or a referral," or "I'm here because this is a programmed inspection." If the inspector ever tells you, "I was just driving by and thought I would check in," that is not an acceptable reason to initiate an inspection, and so it is important to inform that inspector at that time that you are very busy, but this is not an acceptable reason to initiate an inspection, and you would appreciate if they would come back with proper inspection protocols. Let your company management handle that, but I think it's important that you guys as mobile work crews know this, because there are a lot of inspectors out there that will drive by and will see your excavation process on the side of the road, they'll see the high vis, and they'll just stop in because they're curious. And that's absolutely not acceptable. They can only stop in and initiate an inspection under certain conditions and for certain reasons. And your company management is educated on this, but that's why it's important you understand the inspection process and that you know not to ever engage with an OSHA inspector, but to ask them politely to wait while you contact management and let management handle it from there. If you are a crew leader or a foreman, please contact your company management in the office or myself as soon as possible. Okay, page 10, safety training. So, new employee and or West Michigan Dirtworks employees who need follow-up or additional training shall be initially instructed as to the hazards or the nature of the hazards that they will be exposed to on their jobs. So this initial company training that we are doing right now is actually required by law. It's a requirement that we address the hazards that you will be exposed to, and we give you safety training involving on-site, which we did the video you saw earlier with the on-site working conditions, things that you will be exposed to and that you can expect to encounter, and what to do to keep yourself safe and healthy on the job. It's also important that we go through initial training involving the company's safety and health program so that you are aware of the program requirements and the disciplinary or enforcement policies should you choose to break the rules or violate the program policies. Safety meetings. West Michigan Dirtworks will conduct biannual safety meetings and monthly toolbox talks for the entire company. So the subject of these meetings is very specific to the company's tasks and trades. We're not going to be covering things that are not relevant to your work, but we do biannual training as a company because it's very important to continuously talk about the safety requirements, the hazards that you're exposed to, and the things that you can do to keep yourself and your coworkers safe. If we don't talk about safety and we don't continue to remind ourselves about the rules and safe working policies and procedures, it's very easy for us to get complacent and comfortable and just kind of lazy on the job, I guess, and that's how things happen. So it doesn't matter if you're a brand new employee or if you're seasoned. It doesn't take long for you to get comfortable with the sights and the sounds of the equipment around you, the exposure to the heat, the exposure to equipment, and you just get very complacent. And so we want to make sure that we stay very sharp and focused and that we develop a good safety eye and we continuously talk and remind employees about the importance of paying attention and following safe procedures at all times. Hazard communication training. This is required anytime you're working with chemicals. So all chemicals must be stored properly and labeled, and you will be provided information regarding any hazardous chemicals that you're asked to work with, how to work safely with that chemical, how to protect yourself with certain PPE, etc. This is not a company that uses a lot of hazardous chemicals, so there's not going to be a lot of that type of exposure. But just one of the things that I think it's important to note is anytime you are using a chemical on site, say you take a portable container and you put something in that container from the original bin in the shop and you take that container with you to site, that portable container must be labeled. So keep an eye out for portable containers containing hazardous equipment, materials, and make sure that those containers are labeled. Okay, so let's talk about some other safety and health topics. Page 11. Continuing on with hazard communication, it's important that you understand the term SDS, or safety data sheets. The company safety data sheets are compiled and available to you via a PDF that can be downloaded onto your phone. We try to make every SDS PDF available to employees so that when you are working on site, if you ever had an emergency with a chemical, a hazardous chemical that you're using, you have access to that safety data sheet for the information about that hazardous chemical in the event of an emergency, a fire, accidental ingestion, accidental release, things like that. It is also a requirement by law that employees have the safety data sheets available to them for every chemical that they are using and that they are on site at all times. So having them stored in your phone or compiled and put into a book in the truck is just fine as long as you can access them. An infectious disease control plan. So there's been a lot of talk during the years of 2020 through 2022 about COVID and COVID plans and things like that. But I take a much more comprehensive approach to disease mitigation strategies as an industrial hygienist and an occupational and environmental health and safety professional. I'm not just concerned about one virus, I'm concerned about all health and safety issues. So we've developed what we call an infectious disease control plan to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. So employees shall be instructed in proper hygiene etiquette, which is what we're doing right now, as part of your new hire orientation. So always make sure that if you are ill, if you have a fever of 101 degrees or greater, stay home. And you can't return to work until 24 hours until after a fever breaks. Sounds like common sense, right? This is what we always do with our kids. If kids are ill, if they have a fever, they're required to stay home and they cannot go back to school for 24 hours after the fever breaks because you are considered contagious for the following 24 hours after a fever. If you're coughing or sneezing, do it into your elbow. Just basic common health hygiene etiquette. But I think COVID has reawakened a sense of health etiquette in a lot of people that we didn't really think too much about this stuff before. But what we're going to find is that revisiting proper health hygiene and etiquette will actually reduce the spread of the common cold, flus, any virus and things like that. Wash your hands after using the restroom. No brainer. But you guys are in the construction industry and you're out on site all the time. On every construction project with a commercial project, you will have porta-johns that usually contain hand sanitizer. Please get in the habit of using these. I know that it is difficult when you're in the construction environment to maintain the same sanitation procedures, but get used to using hand sanitizers after the restroom and before eating, before smoking, having snacks, things like that. Shared tools and equipment should be sanitized frequently with disinfecting wipes or spray. This can be done in the shop as part of maintenance protocols. Common shared work surfaces shall be sanitized frequently with disinfecting wipes or sprays. This applies to the office where things will be cleaned, disinfected, and hard surfaces wiped down frequently, especially during cold and flu season. West Michigan Dirtworks does provide hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol. Now, these are not provided in the vehicles because I have had situations where hand sanitizer has started on fire, being left in a hot truck. So that's not a good idea, but hand sanitizer is available in the office and in the shop. Okay, let's talk about personal protective equipment. Page 12. Hard hats. Hard hats shall be worn at all times when on a job site. I know we covered this in the video that we did on site where you can actually see employees working in their hard hats and their safety glasses, but this is actually written company policy, so it is enforceable, and MIOSHA will enforce this as well. Hard hats shall be worn at all times, no ifs, ands, or buts. Safety glasses shall be worn whenever there is a risk of flying objects. So when you're working with hand or power tools, if you're cutting, grinding, things like that, you can't have your safety glasses tucked into your hard hat. Remember to put them on. Hand protection, the use of gloves is strongly encouraged and shall be worn at the employee's discretion. And this is because most of the time you are not doing something that will require gloves to avoid cuts and abrasions and lacerations. If you are using tools or if you are cutting, things like that, and you feel you need to have gloves or hand digging for blisters, that's at your discretion and the company will provide those gloves. Foot protection, you are required to wear boots. It is actually a MIOSHA requirement on all construction projects that you have safety shoes, which means leather shoes with a steel toe or leather work boots with a hard sole, not cowboy boots. Protective clothing, High visibility clothing is required at all times on a West Michigan Dirtwork project. Whenever you are working around heavy equipment, and we demonstrated this in the visuals that you saw at the beginning of this video, safety, high visibility safety clothing is incredibly important because it has been proven to grab the peripheral vision of an operator and prevent struck by accidents, rollovers, and runovers. So we use that high safety green, that bright safety green color, high visibility clothing to protect you while working around heavy equipment, especially around those blind spots. Hearing protection, anytime you're running a saw or you're working next to an piece of equipment that's operating at a high decibel level, it's important to wear hearing protection. It is provided by the company, and you can ask your foreman for that anytime you feel you need it. Okay. Our personal protective equipment policy. So each employee shall receive a new hire starter kit upon successful completion of your new hire orientation. This starter kit will include a hard hat, safety glasses, gloves, and company branded high visibility clothing, a winter coat, a water resistant jacket, sweatshirts, and t-shirts. If the employee quits or is terminated within 90 days of hire, they will owe the company 50% of the cost of the starter kit, which shall be taken out of their last paycheck. So it's important for you to understand that. This is a unique company policy. I like it. I think it's great that the company provides so much to you, but if you quit or you're terminated within 90 days, you will owe the company 50% back coming out of your last paycheck. If you quit or are terminated within 180 days of hire, you will owe the company 25% of the cost of that starter kit, which will be taken out of your last paycheck. If the employee quits or is terminated after 180 days, there shall be no reimbursement of the company or to the company for the starter kit. Page 13, please. Each employee shall be given a new supply of sweatshirts and t-shirts annually. If the employee quits or is terminated within 90 days of hire, they will owe the company 50% of the cost of that annual kit, which will also be taken out of your last paycheck. If you quit or are terminated within 180 days of hire, you will owe the company 25% of the cost of that kit, which will be taken out of your last paycheck. If you quit or are terminated after 180 days of hire, there will be no reimbursement to the company for that particular kit. So, if you would like to purchase additional supplies, you may do so at the company's cost. Just ask your foreman or ask the office management. Each employee will be given a new hard hat, safety glasses, and gloves as needed in exchange for the worn or damaged PPE. So make sure if a hard hat ever is struck, you need to replace that. Bring the old hard hat and turn it in, and you'll be given a new one. If your safety glasses are getting scratched and worn and you need new ones, bring the old ones in and you'll be given new ones. So it is an exchange situation so that we don't have people just going through things like crazy, because PPE is very expensive. But it is the employer's responsibility, and West Michigan Dirtworks will make sure that they provide all the PPE you need. Just make sure that you follow this exchange policy, please, so we can keep an eye on our exchange rates. Please take care and take personal responsibility for the care of your PPE so that we're not costing the company undue financial burden. Like I said, these things are very, very expensive. So properly store your hard hats and your safety glasses. Hang up your high visibility clothing, let it dry out properly at the end of each shift. Okay, you see a section there on personal fall protection. So anytime in the construction industry an employee is exposed to a fall of 6 feet or more, it is a requirement that you utilize fall protection. And we're either going to be building a guardrail system or you're going to be wearing a harness. Now, it's not common in West Michigan Dirtworks for you to be doing either. But it is required if there is an open fall hazard that there is some sort of fall protection in place. If we're actively moving down the excavation line, there's no way to put up a guardrail because you're moving past it. That's a feasibility issue, but you also are not going to be able to wear a harness. If there is a situation where you're working around an excavation greater than 6 feet for an extended period of time, then we do need to build a guardrail. And all of the specifications for building a guardrail are listed here. If you need to, refer back to this manual. This is your operations manual. It's always in the foreman's truck. So if you do need to build a guardrail for any situation, please make sure you build it according to these specifications. The top rail and the mid rail need to be positioned at certain heights off the ground. OSHA will pull their tape measure on guardrails, so make sure that you are building your guardrails according to the specifications in this manual as well. Okay, let's skip over to page 14 and go down to ladders. So ladders are a very important part of your work because they need to be inserted in trench boxes for access and egress and in excavations for access and egress. So it's important that you keep an eye on the ladders to make sure that they are free of damage and defects. You have to be looking at the rungs. If the rungs are dented or dimpled or missing, it's important to replace that ladder. Don't just throw the ladder away because of damaged rungs, because you can get a ladder replacement kit and replace those rungs. But it's important if you ever find a damaged ladder or any piece of equipment that you mark it and tag it out of service with a red do not use tag with your initials, and note on that tag why this piece of equipment or this ladder is being tagged out of service. If MIOSHA comes on site and they see any damaged or defective equipment and it is in use or it is not tagged out of service, the company will get a citation for using damaged and defective equipment. So make sure that you're always keeping an eye on and inspecting your ladders, that they're in good, safe working condition. The cross bracing, if you see a ladder set up, a step ladder set up, and the cross bracing is hanging down like this, it's damaged. That means there's no structural integrity to that side of the ladder and it must be disposed of. The best way to dispose of a ladder is to cut the ladder right down the middle, creating two halves. That way nobody can take a damaged or defective ladder, put it in use somewhere else and get hurt. Okay. Page 15. So it's important that you set up a ladder within 25 feet of employees in every excavation. And anytime the excavation is greater than 5 feet in depth, you have to have a ladder set up for access and egress. But ladder setup is important, just as well as inspecting the ladders for damage and defects. It's important that you make sure the ladder setup is proper. So ladders have to be within 25 feet of every employee laterally. And when you set up a ladder, it's important that you set it up at the proper ladder angle. The ratio needs to be set up at a 4:1 ratio. Can't be too steep or it will tip, can't be too shallow or it will kick out. So set up that ladder at the proper ladder angle at 75.5 degrees and make sure that the side rails extend 3 feet above the landing surface, minimum. So how do you know if you have 3 feet of ladder side rails extending above the landing surface? You count the rungs. Each rung is about 11 inches. So if you go 3.5 to 4 rungs above the edge of the excavation or the trench box, you'll be perfectly safe. But OSHA does look for these things, so make sure that you are pulling those ladders with sufficient handrails above and beyond where the ladder hits the side of the trench box or the excavation. Okay, hand and power tools. We talked about tools a little bit in as far as making sure that you don't remove guards and things like that, but always get in the habit of inspecting your tools before use. Just give them a quick glance over, make sure that all the belts and the pulleys and the guards, switches and safety sensors are working. They're not defective or damaged, and make sure that you glance over your cords. Electrical cords get damaged, cut, things like that very quickly in the construction environment. The construction environment is very hard on our tools and equipment. So make sure that you always inspect your tools before use, that they're in proper working condition and safe, and that the electrical cords are not damaged as well. And again, anytime you see a portable power tool that is damaged or defective for any reason, please make sure that you put a red do not use tag on it, put your initials on it, and the reason you're tagging it out of service, then set it to the side. Then make sure that you return that equipment to the shop, and where the shop facility manager can make sure that it is replaced or it is repaired. Let's talk about GFCI. So ground fault circuit interrupters excuse me, need to be used at all times. And OSHA will look for this on your tools. So your tools either need to be double insulated or they need to be plugged into what we call a pigtail, that GFCI that's plugged in then to the wall, unless you're using a grounded generator on site. But again, OSHA will look at your generators. Make sure your generators are grounded and that they're not running without ground fault circuit interruption protection. Okay, electrical safety. So electrical safety is a big concern for me with you working in the excavation industry, because underground electrical lines are very, very dangerous, and they're a real serious hazard and common in your world. So it's important that you pay attention, not just to your extension cords and GFIs, but also with the excavation environment to those live energized lines that you may be digging around. And I'm going to skip down to trenching and excavations because I want to talk about what that means before beginning an excavation. So you know, in Michigan, we need to contact MISDIG to verify the location of all underground utilities. You have to follow all MISDIG guidelines for excavation and exposure of utilities. Page 17. I'm actually going to read through every bullet point here on page 17, and I want you to follow along with me because this is one of the most dangerous and hazardous aspects of your work and one of the most common causes of serious injury and fatalities, contacting live underground utilities that were not properly marked or were not properly hand dug and supported. So where underground utilities are known to be present and live, you must expose the lines by hand digging only. Once the utilities are exposed, you must support the lines to ensure that they remain protected and out of the way during the excavation process. If an underground utility line is contacted or damaged, immediately evacuate the area, stop the work, and notify the owner of the line. And then wait for further direction and clearance before the owner before resuming any work activities in the area. No employee may be allowed to enter an excavation deeper than 5 feet unless the sides of the excavation have been sloped, benched, shored, or shielded to prevent cave-in. That's the magic rule, 5 feet. And OSHA will pull a tape on this, and I have seen them write citations for 5 feet, 2 inches. So if it's at 5 feet, you better make sure that there's proper sloping, shielding, shoring, or protection. All protective structures shall be designed to withstand the potential load imposed by a cave-in based on soil type, density, the depth of cut, etc., per the excavation tables located in the excavation standard, or is designed and approved by a registered professional engineer. That means if you're using a trench box, that trench box has to be designed to withstand the load that could be imposed by the failure of the excavation walls. If you are installing shoring, that shoring system cannot just be a piece of plywood and some hydraulic jacks. We have to know that that system will be able to support the load to protect the employees in the excavation in the event of a cave-in. And West Michigan Dirtworks does work with professional engineers, registered engineers, to provide the proper load systems and ratings, and the engineer will work with and has worked with West Michigan Dirtworks management to make sure that we have the proper systems, the protective structures in place. Okay, no employee shall be allowed to operate excavation equipment until they have been fully trained as a competent person. Competent person training is a very specific training, okay, for an operator, for excavation and trench safety, and have had training by an accredited training organization or in-house by a competent person. So the training can be done by a foreman, a crew leader, or a manager within the company who has years of experience and has been credentialed previously by another training facility. That's what makes them a competent person. Okay, so this training shall consist of oral and hands-on practical training. All in-field, on-the-job training shall be done under the direct supervision of a foreman. So training has to be both practical and oral. So you have to be instructed on what you're to do, then you have to go into the field and actually practice it under the supervision of a foreman. And the training must be documented. Okay, so your foreman or your company management will document the date of your training and what the training involved. The operator shall do a manual and a visual test of the soil to determine what type of soil is being excavated before any excavation. At West Michigan Dirtworks, because in Michigan most of our soil consists of sand, there are stratified layers usually. When you look at the layers of soil, you'll see clay, you'll see loam, but usually you see a layer of sand in there somewhere. So at West Michigan Dirtworks, all operators, they really will consider most soil to be type C, which is in a 1.5 to 1 bench ratio. So it's important that you never just assume, if you've come from another company that assumes a 1-to-1 ratio, it's important that you assume at West Michigan Dirtworks a 1.5 to 1 ratio. Now, if you're a new employee and you've never operated equipment, you don't understand what that means. That's okay. If you are an operator, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so at West Michigan Dirtworks, we're not just going to assume everything is a 1-to-1 slope ratio or bench ratio. That will get you into trouble with Class C soil because most of our soil types in Michigan contain sand, which is the weakest soil layer and must be excavated to according to that proper soil type. If West Michigan Dirtworks is notified by any client or owner that the soil being excavated or removed is contaminated, or if the site has been classified as a brownfield, all employees shall receive a minimum of a 16-hour HAZWOPER training course per my OSHA guidelines. So if the company is ever notified by say a utility owner or a developer that there was a gas station here previously, there's benzenes in the soil, or maybe there's formaldehydes from a previous dry cleaner, we're going to have to put you through what's called HAZWOPER training, and that's Hazardous Waste Operations and Emergency Response. I teach those classes, and that's a completely separate class, but you cannot begin digging or excavating in any soil that's contaminated that could release contaminants into the air, cause you to be ill or get sick just from breathing in leads, benzenes, and contamination. We must store, if you are excavating, if you are an operator, all spoils piles. A minimum, my OSHA requirements are 2 feet, minimum of 2 feet from the edge. Personally, I would prefer to see at least 3 feet, just because if we're digging deep, that spoils piles actually becomes part of the excavation edge, and it only increases the depth of the excavation. Always guard the edges of an excavation that are left open overnight with caution tape, barriers, cones, something like that. Sometimes you're moving quickly and you're not in one place for very long. Other times there are excavations that are left wide open for days, weeks, months. It depends on the project, but if you are on a commercial project, say, where you're digging ponds, retention ponds, underground utilities, and they're left open for a long time and you're gone after you do your work, that will be the responsibility of the general contractor or the owner of that project. But while you're actively digging and working, it is important that you pull caution tape or snow fence on any excavations that are left open for protection of the public or other contractors. When trench shields are installed, workers must remain inside the protective structure at all times. That means you're getting into and out of the trench via ladder. You're not walking outside the trench box to a ladder that's in an unprotected area. Okay, so that's important, proper setup. Okay, let's skip down to confined spaces. A confined space is any space that has a limited means of entry and exit, and it is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. It is illegal for an employee to enter into a confined space without proper training. The only confined spaces that you guys are going to be involved in would be an underground utility or a vault. If you're tying into existing sewer mains or anything like that, you could find yourself working in or around those confined spaces. So you need to be trained, you have to have proper training. Sorry, page 18 now. You have to have proper training to recognize confined spaces and the nature of the hazard involved in confined space work before you can enter into what's considered a confined space. So the confined space has to be evaluated to determine whether or not it's a permit required confined space before any employee may enter. Any permit required confined space must be tested for hazardous atmospheres before an employee is allowed to enter or work into the permit required space. If a hazardous atmosphere is known, or if there's a potential for a hazardous atmosphere to develop, mechanical exhaust must be set up and the space actually has to be retested. How do we test a confined space? We drop what's called a gas monitor, a 4-gas monitor, or in the industry we call it a sniffer. Okay, you're going to drop that down into the space and you're going to take a reading. We're looking for oxygen deprivation, oxygen values. We're looking for anything else that could be present. And in trenches and in excavations, gases like methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, radon, argon, these are all very common types of things that you could be exposed to that are actually considered chemical asphyxiants. These gases will displace the oxygen in the air, causing you to be exposed to oxygen deficient atmospheres, and you may not even know it because there's not necessarily a smell associated with it. There's not a taste or an odor. So it's important that we keep an eye on confined spaces, deep excavations and trenches by utilizing our air gas monitors and watching specifically for oxygen levels. Our oxygen levels that are safe for human beings are between 19.5% and 23.5%. Our bodies can only tolerate oxygen fluctuations of 4%. So it's important to set these air gas monitors up, these 4-gas monitors up around the excavations, and definitely before you enter into a confined space to make sure that our oxygen levels are within that 19.5 to 23.5% range. Okay, housekeeping. Housekeeping is one of my pet peeves because it's not difficult to keep your area clean. Make sure scrap, materials, garbage, debris, wrappers, food wrappers, make sure that is always picked up and disposed of properly in proper containers. Even your materials that you're working with on site, make sure that they're stacked and stored neatly and out of the way. OSHA will cite a contractor for poor housekeeping if they're on site and their materials are all over the place, creating slips, trips, falls hazard, or creating additional hazards with other contractors working nearby. So make sure that you're keeping your area clean, not just from garbage, but also with your own materials stacked neatly and out of the way. It's also important that when you are practicing or utilizing staging areas for your materials, that you are never storing materials in emergency roadways. There will be emergency roadways around every project, and you are usually the first one on the project. So it's important that your pipe and your conduit and things like that is never stored in what's considered to be an emergency access or egress road. In case we had to get a fire or emergency ambulance in and out, you don't want to have your materials staged in the wrong area, so keep an eye on that. All right, respiratory protection. West Michigan Dirtworks does not require the use of respirators for any job tasks. Nuisance dust masks will be made available to you at request, but there is nothing that this company is doing with chemicals or chemical exposures unless you were to be working on a contaminated HAZWOPER site, and that's a whole different story. But at this point, West Michigan Dirtworks does not need to use respirators because there is no need to protect you from hazardous air or hazardous atmosphere exposure. Okay, disciplinary policy. This is the part nobody likes to talk about, that's why it's last. West Michigan Dirtworks is committed to providing employees with a safe and healthy workplace in order to enforce compliance with job site safety rules, OSHA regulations, and company procedures. And to ensure that each employee is treated fairly, West Michigan Dirtworks has established an employee disciplinary policy. It is important that you understand this policy because if you were to break the rules or if you were to violate company or OSHA safety and health policies and regulations, you will be subject to disciplinary action. But we don't feel that it's fair for you to be subject to disciplinary action if you've never been informed of what that is. So we're going to go through this policy real quickly together at the bottom of page 18. So each West Michigan Dirtworks employee will be informed and trained, that's what we're doing here, on the company's safety and health management program, the policies contained within the company's safety manual, and the disciplinary measures that will be taken if you do not follow the requirements. This information will be communicated through new employee hire orientation, which is what we're doing right now, and employee meetings. So we're going to follow up with our biannual meetings, and occasionally if we start seeing trends that are not good, we'll revisit. There are toolbox talks or as a reminder, things like that. As a condition of employment, each West Michigan Dirtworks employee will be expected to perform their assigned duties and tasks in a manner consistent with the project safety requirements. Okay, page 19, let's talk about these guidelines. So what are the guidelines for disciplinary action? Okay, so we're going to read through this policy together because I just want to make sure that every employee understands very clearly what the expectations are and the disciplinary actions that will be taken if there were to be a violation of the company policies and procedures. So follow along if you would with me on page 19. Any West Michigan Dirtworks employee observed violating a project safety policy will immediately be given verbal instruction to correct the violations. The disciplinary action shall be administered according to the company disciplinary policy. All disciplinary actions will be documented on the daily job log and communicated to West Michigan Dirtworks management, including verbal warnings. Now, if you are given a verbal warning, that has to be documented in your company file, in your employee file, because if there were to be a second violation, then we would have to move on to the written warning. Well, how would we know if it's a second violation if we haven't documented that you received a verbal warning the first time, right? Okay, all disciplinary actions will be documented in your file and the project file by date and the employee name. West Michigan Dirtworks will determine if the safety violation committed by the employee was due to ignorance, a misunderstanding, or if it was a willful or repeat action. If it is determined that the violation was committed due to ignorance or a misunderstanding, then retraining and other instruction shall be given and the matter closed without disciplinary action. For willful and repeat violations, a determination will be made as to the seriousness of the violation, and a minimum of written disciplinary notice will be issued. The disciplinary action will vary depending on the seriousness of the violation. West Michigan Dirtworks has the discretion to follow the progressive disciplinary steps or to terminate the employee, depending on the severity of the violation and the attitude of the employee towards compliance with company safety policies. So attitude is everything here. If you're an employee who is trying, you're new, maybe you forgot, we're not just going to go right to firing you, right? This is why we have a progressive disciplinary policy, because we want to help people grow and learn. And if you just forgot something or it was a misunderstanding, well, we're going to actually work with you to help you learn, retraining, and then reinforcement. If you're having a bad attitude and you just simply dig your heels in and say, well, I've never done it this way before, this is the way I've always done it, and you're resistant to our company policies and procedures, then you're going to have problems here, because we will enforce the rules and you will be disciplined. A minor violation is defined as an unsafe act that is not likely to result in serious injury or significant property damage. A major violation is defined as an unsafe act that is likely to result in serious injury or property damage. Disciplinary actions for all violations are at the discretion of West Michigan Dirtworks and may involve retraining, suspension without pay, or termination depending on circumstances and attitude. A major violation that is willful may result in immediate termination of employment without having to follow through the progressive steps. It is the intent of West Michigan Dirtworks to utilize a progressive disciplinary system that allows the employee to grow in their safety and compliance knowledge. So, what are the corrective actions that you can expect? Number one will be a verbal warning. Again, this will be documented on the daily job log and in the employee file, and this is for a first-time offense. Number two, a written warning. This will be documented on the daily job log and in the employee file, and this would be for a second-time offense. Number three, a level 1 layoff. This is 1 day laid off without pay. An employee involved in an unsafe act will be given 1 day off without pay if the unsafe act was a repeat violation for which the employee was previously warned about, or if it was a willful violation. This means the employee knew that the act was unsafe or non-compliant, and there is a low probability that the unsafe act could result in a serious injury or property damage. Okay, page 20. Number 4, a level 2 layoff would be 3 days without pay. And this would be a situation in which an employee involved in an unsafe act will be given 3 days off without pay for the unsafe act that was a repeat violation for which the employee was previously warned about. Or if it was a willful violation, that means the employee knew that this was an unsafe or non-compliant act, and there is a high probability that the unsafe act could result in serious injury or property damage. Number 5, termination. Any employee caught in an unsafe act will be immediately terminated if the following conditions exist. The employee had previously received level 2 layoff, disciplinary action for the same or similar violation. The employee had previously received level 2 layoff discipline twice for different situations. The employee knowingly commits an imminent danger violation and displays little regard for compliance. The employee has a bad attitude and is not willing to cooperate with employee company policies. West Michigan Dirtworks management also reserves the right to terminate at its sole discretion. Okay, drug testing. West Michigan Dirtworks has implemented a policy on alcohol and substance abuse testing for all employees following an accident if it is likely that, or there is a suspicion that alcohol or substance, an alternative substance, could have contributed toward that accident based on reasonable cause. So this is not an automatic drug testing. It is a drug testing policy where we look and we say, this isn't normal. There must have been something going on here. This was not a reasonable accident. There may have been a controlled substance or alcohol involved. Post-accident, the policy requires drug testing following an accident that involves medical treatment beyond first aid of any person when it appears the accident may have been caused by the use of drugs or alcohol. Employees who have been sent by West Michigan Dirtworks for medical treatment other than first aid, so above and beyond something that you can do with your first aid kit, will be tested on a case-by-case determination. Employees who cause or may have caused an injury to another person as a result of their actions will be tested on a case-by-case determination. Guidelines similar to those used in the OSHA record-keeping standard shall be used and applied in distinguishing medical care from first aid. So let me talk to you real quickly on this topic about medical care versus first aid. Anytime you receive an injury on site that you can treat out of the first aid kit that's in your truck, that does not need to be reported to OSHA, but it does need to be recorded on the company's injury and illness logs. If you ever receive or sustain an injury that requires you to go to urgent care or the emergency room, it's beyond something you can fix with your first aid kit, that may need to be reported. So make sure you are always filling out the proper documentation post-treatment. So just a little note on that. Okay, reasonable cause at the bottom of page 20. This policy requires alcohol and drug testing in situations where, based on physical, behavioral, or performance indicators, a reasonable person would suspect the person is using drugs, alcohol, or is otherwise unfit for duty as determined by West Michigan Dirtworks management. Okay, and last page, page 21, driving vehicles enforced by the DOT. Okay, so this policy covers an employee while engaged in driving licensed vehicles on the public highway. All drivers are required to, number one, do an inspection of the vehicle called a pre-trip inspection prior to the start of the workday. Document the results on the inspection form and maintain the document throughout the day. Please note the attached checklist. So these forms are available in the back of the company safety manual, or you can get them from the shop manager. Number two, inspect the vehicle at the end of the workday. This is called a post-trip inspection. The results of the post-trip inspection are to be given to the person required to make repairs. The vehicle is considered out of service until the repairs are complete and may not be driven. Number three, the driver is required to review the repairs and sign off in agreement that the work appears to have been completed. Number four, load securement is essential during every trip. Use the proper securement points, the correct capacity and number of tie-down chains, and the use of ratchet chain binders, which are very important for keeping the load secured on the trailer. Number five, accidents involving traffic are important and require notification of company management. If no fatalities are involved, standard notification. If the driver is involved in a fatal accident while driving, the driver is to be taken to have a drug and alcohol test immediately administered. So this is the end of the company safety and health policy. If there are updates, you'll be notified by company management and your foreman and be provided training on any updates or additions to the company safety and health policy. So we welcome you to the team here at West Michigan Dirtworks. We're very excited to have you. As you can see, this is a company that cares very much about your safety, your health, and your well-being. And we enforce and use disciplinary policy only as needed, but only because we care about you and we want to make sure that you return home safely to your families in the same condition you showed up for work every day. If you have any questions, if you're unsure about anything, we encourage you to please ask your foreman, please work with company management. We want to make sure that your questions are answered, that you're always working safely and healthy, and that you have a great experience here as a West Michigan Dirtworks employee. Thank you very much.
At West Michigan Dirtworks, your safety and well-being is our number one priority. We give every employee, whether it's the first day on the job or a seasoned veteran, the authority to stop work if they're unsure of something safe. If you see something that is unsafe or you're unsure, you have the authority to stop work and ask your foreman for assistance.